For over half a century, the United States has maintained a large and diverse nuclear arsenal to deter other countries from even contemplating a nuclear strike against America. Now, as the Pentagon embarks on a wide-ranging and hugely expensive plan to modernize what's known as the Triad, bombers, submarines, and missiles, there are calls to rethink whether all three are needed. Special correspondent Jamie McIntyre has our report, produced in partnership with the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting.
Behind this massive 8-ton door, 60 feet below the frozen fields of North Dakota,
we talk about targeting actions.
A 27-year-old first lieutenant heads a two-person team with a singular mission. The two junior Air Force officers are missileers, entrusted with executing the most consequential of presidential orders. At almost the same time, at nearby Minot Air Force Base, a B-52 Stratofortress that's been flying for more than half a century is drenched with de-icing fluid. Its aging jet engines roar to life with the help of 8 explosive charges, a method developed during the Cold War to give the bomber a quick kickstart in a crisis. All the while, hundreds of feet beneath the Pacific Ocean, sailors aboard a U.S. ballistic missile submarine methodically perform their weekly doomsday drill. 3 ways to do the same thing: end the world as we know it by launching nuclear weapons.
Turn. Launching. 7 away.
Missiles, bombers, subs. America's nuclear triad, a 3-pronged approach to deterrence that dates back to the 1960s. When the former Soviet Union was the enemy, MAD, mutual assured destruction, the strategy, and thermonuclear war seemed a real possibility.
The real key here, as you look at the combination of the triad, is making the adversary's problem very complex, very costly, so that restraint is a better option.
U.S. Strategic Commander Cecil Haney is the 4-star admiral in charge of America's nuclear arsenal. He says the triad endures because it's still the surest way to guarantee that even if hit with a first strike, plenty of U.S. nuclear weapons would be enough to allow Haney to present the president a full range of options.
Ship is rigged for dive, sir.
It's a strategy based on redundancy, having backups for survive. Backups.
6970. Roll bridge ring, tube 2.
But to critics, maintaining and rebuilding all 3 legs of the triad in the 21st century amounts to expensive overkill. Among those critics, former Defense Secretary William Perry.
Well, you can have belts and suspenders, and then belts and suspenders for the belts and suspenders, and that's what we're getting into here.
Perry says the current strategy is based on the folly of winning a nuclear conflict, the kind of Cold War thinking caricatured in the classic movie Dr. Strangelove.
Mr. President, I'm not saying we wouldn't get our hair mussed, but I do say no more than 10 to 20 million killed, tops, depending on the breaks.
The whole sort of Dr. Strangelove rationale is the one with how you use nuclear weapons, which was endemic to the Cold War, I don't think is in place today. If we regard nuclear weapons, the role of nuclear weapons today, as preventing the use of nuclear weapons against us, then all of that goes away.
The United States is at the point where, to maintain the safety and reliability of its aging nuclear arsenal, largely designed along with upgraded bombs and missiles to go with them.
28, launcher closure door open.
Add in the possibility of next-generation land-based intercontinental ballistic in the 1950s and 60s, almost everything needs an upgrade. There are plans for new submarines and stealth bombers, and the price tag comes to an eye-popping $1 trillion over 30 years. Despite the substantial cost, trimming the triad is not an issue that's gotten any serious examination on the presidential campaign trail. It did come up once in last December's GOP debate.
Of the 3 legs of the triad, though, do you have a priority? Because I want to go to Senator Rubio after that.
I think to me, nuclear is just the power, the devastation is very important to me.
If Donald Trump had an understanding of the triad, he gave no hint, and it fell to Marco Rubio to fill in the gap.
The triad is our ability of the United States to conduct nuclear attacks using airplanes, using missiles launched from silos or from the ground, and also from our nuclear subs.
Each leg of the triad has its advantages. Submarines are stealthy, virtually undetectable, and therefore nearly invulnerable. Bombers are slow enough to be recalled at the last minute.
Item 129, first stage ignition and missile.
It's the third leg, the intercontinental ballistic missiles on hair-trigger alert that are under the microscope.
We're flying over the missile field that essentially surrounds Minot Air Force Base. 150 ICBMs buried in silos underground, spread across 8,500 square miles of North Dakota.
It's just one of 3 missile fields that cover 5 states: Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, and North Dakota. 450 ICBMs altogether. Were it not for the security fence, this silo would be barely visible in the snow. But the locals know where it is, and so do America's enemies.
Incoming emergency action message.
I agree.
Having so many missiles in fixed, known locations makes them a tempting target if an adversary were to contemplate a first strike, which in turn, critics argue, creates pressure to launch right away at the first sign of attack. Among those critics, no less than former U.S. Strategic Commander General James Cartwright.
You've automatically forced the president, in our case, to make a decision to use his weapons or lose them. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Use or lose does not contribute to deterrence.
Cartwright is now chair of studies at Global Zero, a disarmament advocacy organization. He thinks the day of the ICBM may have come and gone.
I believe that the current ICBM structure, the way it's based and the way it operates, is probably not something that we need to carry to the future.
Jim Miller was Undersecretary of Defense for Policy during the Obama administration and led the Pentagon's review of nuclear weapons policy. He argues that land-based ICBMs are a hedge against unforeseen complications.
Without a substantial number of ICBMs in the United States, if we had some problem, a technical problem or a vulnerability because of anti-submarine warfare of a potential adversary with our submarines, we'd be left with an adversary having to undertake an attack involving only a handful of aim points in order to take out our deterrent.
At Minot Air Force Base, Colonel Kelvin Townsend, Vice Commander of the 91st Missile Wing, stressed that neither subs, which have to be contacted at sea, nor bombers, which have to be put on alert and fly to their launch points, can match land-based missiles for speed of response.
Anywhere on the planet we can be within a moment's notice, and within roughly 30 plus minutes we could be there.
But that quick reaction time makes the ICBM potentially the most destabilizing leg of the Triad, argues former Defense Secretary William Perry.
If you're going to blow up the whole world, what is the hurry? Why do you mind waiting another 20 minutes to do that? I don't see either the common sense or even the strategic argument for doing that.
And Perry says no one has found any reliable way to detect or defeat submarines at sea. Bombers and submarines can do the job, he argues, with a high degree of confidence. At the Air and Space Museum in Washington, Joe Cirincione gazes at a Minuteman III ICBM on display. He's president of the Plowshares Fund, which advocates deep cuts in the U.S. nuclear arsenal. He says supporters of keeping all 3 legs of the Triad have lost touch with the destructive power of the weapons.
One nuclear weapon on one city would be a disaster that we haven't seen since World War II. 10 nuclear weapons on 10 cities would be a catastrophe beyond historical experience. And hundreds of weapons on hundreds of cities could end human history altogether. Why do you need 5,000?
For now, the debate over the Triad is purely academic. The latest Pentagon budget funds plans to begin rebuilding all 3 legs, and no one in Congress is mounting any serious opposition. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jamie McIntyre.
There's a lot more online about rebuilding America's Triad. You can see excerpts of key interviews and view a photo essay. All that at pbs.org/newshour.